Hi, this is Creating Your Life on Sex and Romance, episode 41, The War Against Boys. Hi, Mark Andre Alexander back for the next segment of Sex and Romance. Last time we focused on male consciousness, and I'm going to take a little side trip on that, on the war against boys, and before we go on to female consciousness, which is going to be very interesting. The war against boys, well, let me read you some, or talk about some newspaper articles. In Pikesville, Maryland, there was a 13-year-old boy, and he apparently had a bet with somebody that somebody dared him to go up and kiss a 14-year-old girl, and so he did. And now police are saying he's now facing second-degree assault charges. The story doesn't go much more than that. So at face value, he just went up maybe and gave her a peck on the cheek. Now, if he went up and grabbed her and held her against her will and kissed her on the mouth and that kind of thing, that maybe this makes sense. But it's kind of questionable. And right now, it does seem kind of odd if that was all it was, go up and kiss a girl and that's it, that there would be assault charges. Now, by itself, this story wouldn't mean much. But let me read some other ones to you. Pennsylvania boy, 10 years old. He was suspended for using an imaginary bow and arrow. Not a real one, an imaginary one, if you can believe that. 10 years old. Here's another one. An 8-year-old. He was threatened with being expelled because of some drawings he did. Now, apparently he was thinking up Halloween costumes, so he drew these 3 images. One was of a soldier, one of a ninja, and one of a Star Wars character. They all had guns or knives or something. But the police kind of freaked out. The headmaster threatened to expel him for these highly disturbing pictures. Next one. Park Elementary second grader. Apparently he took a Pop-Tart, and remember, he's only 7 years old. He took a Pop-Tart, and according to him, he was trying to, nibble at it into the shape of a mountain. But it ended up looking like a gun, and maybe he pretended it was a gun. But that was enough for him to be suspended. So why am I telling you all this? There's a pattern here, and it's something that's really disturbing. And people will eventually start putting together the damage that's being caused here. Let me explain. Well, let me give you one more. A 6-year-old, all right? 8-year-olds or 7 years old, not enough. 6-year-old kissed a girl, suspended, accused of sexual harassment at 6 years old. Okay, here's the thing. In our schools, and this is in the U.S., there seems to be an effort to socially engineer boyness or maleness or male tendencies out of young boys. Girls are much more civilized, much more compliant with order and structure. Boys, obviously, less so. And so increasingly, it seems like boys are seen as defective girls. There's something wrong with them, this aggressive energy, this tendency towards competition and violent imagery and playing soldier and that kind of thing. And it's being denigrated as if it's somehow illegitimate, that there is something wrong with them, and that it automatically leads to bad things if they're allowed to be indulged. Male energy is different from female energy. It's there, and it's going to come out. And one of the things is, if you start denigrating male consciousness, if you start putting a lid on it, or you don't have some kind of healthy outlet for it, it can come out in unexpected, inappropriate, and I would argue that it potentially could come out in publicly destructive ways. Remember back in the first segment, we had we talked about rites of passage, and about boys and men's bodies. This idea that young boys or boys they used to go through a process of maleness to take on the identity of being an adult man. And they would have fathers, take them out to hunt or go through some kind of ritualized rite of passage into manhood. And less this has been de-emphasized. In fact, the more you think it's okay to raise boys in an environment where there isn't these kind of rites of passages, what happens is you have boys in men's bodies, boys remaining boys. You have a lot of men into their 20s and 30s and so on who still have a frat boy consciousness, who still do not, they never really owned being a man of sorts. And there's consequences for that. Often they don't know how to appropriately channel their male energy, or they are start being denied roles that apply that energy in effective ways. And it's true that in a way boys need to be civilized, and taking on the male roles that traditionally have helped civilize them is important. Some of these come naturally to female consciousness, but that energy needs to be restrained. But if it's restrained only externally, that's a problem. Boys need to have an internal constraining system, some way that it comes naturally from the inside, and this usually comes through having strong and healthy pictures of maleness and being a man. If that doesn't happen, boys become confused about roles in society, and they may act out in unexpected ways. I recommend a couple books on this if you're interested in exploring it further. There's interesting research and discussion going on. A feminist named Christina Hoff Sommers has written a book on the war against boys, how misguided policies are harming our young men. From her point of view, there's a kind of boy-averse trend taking hold, where there's no recess, there's no dodgeball, there's no way to engage this active energy, that schools are moving to be more feeling-centered, risk-averse, competition-free, sedentary, in a way more inward, something that's more the place for female consciousness, which we'll discuss next time. And so you can see what the balance is. But trying to turn boys into girls in this way, it can be very ineffective. Another book is by Dr. Helen Smith, Men on Strike, Why Men Are Boycotting Marriage, Fatherhood, and the American Dream, and Why It Matters. And she has a kind of extension or another way of looking at this, that men either consciously or subconsciously are beginning to feel like our social structure is stacked against us, being a man. I know what she's talking about, that there's a lack of incentive for being a responsible father or a husband or a provider. And so men are kind of going on strike as a consequence. They don't want to be injured by the laws, the attitudes, the hostilities. If you want to understand where one of the big places this is happening right now, do a Google search on college campuses and rape, especially in terms of men on campus being falsely accused of rape, or what's being regarded now as sexual assault. And it's getting to the point where young college men, sometimes you got to wonder, why do they even bother going to college if they're going into in a culture where they're assumed to be bad out of an accusation. And often the due process function of any kind of legally sanctioned response to these kind of things is being denied them. It's an important issue. It's something that's happening a lot. It's worth investigating. Next time, however, we're going to turn to female consciousness, and we'll have 2 parts on that. In the meantime, check out my website, marcandrealexander.com.